perfectly fine. For those of you I don't know, I'm Lindsay Gleason-Reed. I'm the Assistant Director at the Community Foundation of the New River Valley, and I help put together our monthly Third Thursday series, which are sessions and workshops designed for topics for nonprofit partners. But anyone who's interested in the topic is always welcome to join. You don't have to necessarily be part of a nonprofit partner to join. We keep these free and try to have them on the third Thursday of each month. And often they will be virtual and we'll get them recorded and have them on our website afterward for folks to go back to. But we also have them quarterly in person and typically try to structure those around lunchtime. So this morning we'll be recording and I'll share this probably early next week after I get it all edited. And then we will, I'll send it out to folks. Couple housekeeping things. If you have your speaker on, if you could just mute that while we're talking, that would be great, just for echoing purposes. And I have captions on below, and you can always turn those off if you'd like to, but those are helpful for folks who are deaf or hard of hearing, or if you're in a loud space or can't have the sound on for some reason. So, but you're always welcome to turn them off below. In terms of things coming up at the Community Foundation, we next month's third Thursday will be September 16th still, and we will be focusing on talking to you all about a new communication tool called Mighty Networks that Jess Wergo, our CEO, and some other folks have been working on developing. So we're excited to share that with you all. We are in the process of reviewing grants. So if you all submitted a grant, just know that's in the review process. And if you log into the grant system and you don't see it, don't worry. You just can't see it while it's in the review process. So it's there. But just know that we have a team of folks reading those applications right now. And this may be on your radar, but those awards will be announced in early November. Last thing that I'll mention, and it will be here before we know it, we have a scholarship process, so we'll open in early October. We support students who are high school seniors or those already in college, and this can be for someone who's going to a 2 or 4 year college or university, someone who's at a trade or technical school, or a student, an adult returning to college. So we support folks of all kinds who are living or studying in the New River Valley. So if you have a student in your life or you're taking classes, we would be so delighted to support you. And the best way to stay up to date on all this information is to get our monthly e-newsletter. We send that out typically twice a month, and you can get all the latest news from there. So I'm going to pass it over to today's presenter, Holly Kobia, who is a fundraising strategist and the principal and founder of Kobia Consulting. Holly is a fundraising expert, and if anyone who's ever taken a class from her or read her her blog or anything else, you know that she has a lot of great things to share, and we're just so excited to have her with us today. So I'll pass it over to you, Holly. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. And can folks see my screen just yet? Do I need to reshare that?
You could reshare.
Okay, wonderful. Good to see everyone. Just give me one moment while I set this up. Okay. Here we are. Can we see that all right? Okay, wonderful. So good to see everyone. Thank you all for being here. Holly Kobia. I've spent about 20 years in fundraising, communications, all of those types of things, and put on a number of events from very small to very large, and certainly understand that events do a lot of different things other than just raise money. So we're going to be talking about a wide range. I know sometimes in the beginning we all think about events just about fundraising, but I want to stretch our thinking about strategy around events beyond that. And also consideration, are they actually helping us raise money in different ways? So that's what we're going to be working through today, how to elevate your events as well, which was, I think, originally the title. I tweaked it a bit. But I want us to be thinking about our events in a multitude of ways. And some of you probably already do this, but it gives us a moment to reflect and remind ourselves about the different things that our events can do for our organizations and, most importantly, our mission. Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and say it. Not every event is about raising money. It can be about a lot of different things, as we all know, and primarily sometimes for smaller nonprofits, we think about events first to raise money. Why else are we going to do them? But I would suggest that there are a multitude of reasons as to why we host events, from very big to very small. And I want us to begin to think about our strategy when we are thinking about our calendar for the year, whether that's July 1 to June 30, a regular calendar year, or something in between. When we sit down as a team, or if it's just one of us, or if it's with our board, to think about the meaningful work that we are going to do in the coming year when it is involving fundraising, because our events are a big part of our fundraising, whether that event is actually raising money or if it's doing another function to promote our mission, which will inevitably raise funds and money for our organization. So I want us to think about events as, yes, we have the fundraising events. Yes, we use these as cultivation tools. Yes, we use events as identification for new prospects. Perhaps board members bring friends along or bring others that care deeply about the mission that that our organization is focused on. And these events can also be focused on stewardship. Some events are just about stewarding our donors, our volunteers, all sorts of things. And some of our events can do a multitude of these things, and they do naturally, right? So I think what we need to do, and what I've done with thinking through event planning, and what I would suggest is really evaluate which key points are our events hitting on. Is this an event that is primarily stewardship, but can also be a little cultivation towards what's next, can be a little momentum building or awareness building, but what is the primary focus? And then perhaps some secondary as well. But I want us to think first about the primary driving purpose of each event that we host or put on or help coordinate. Certainly, we would love for every event to generate some revenue. Certainly want them to strengthen relationships and bring people closer to our organization, perhaps bring people into our pipeline a little bit more. And again, they can do many things. What is the primary function first? And then for those of us that have some events that are fundraising primarily, how do we evaluate those? How do we know whether they're really effective or we're just doing work and things just for the sake of doing it sometimes? I've been there and done that and earned that badge the hard way. So I think this is just it's hard work to kind of find the time to evaluate all of this. All right. So we have a busy event. We have a packed room. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's successful depending on what the goal of the event is, right? Attendance feels wonderful. That builds momentum, it builds awareness, and that can be really lovely. Not if it costs us a lot of money that we're not going to recoup. Okay. Now, if we budgeted for that and it's purely about people, connection, mission, then lovely. I'm glad we packed the room. But it doesn't tell the whole story, of course. And revenue. So gross revenue. Okay, well, this is a great event, Holly, because it brings in $50,000 a year for our nonprofit, and that's huge for us. Lovely. But how much do we actually net, right? How much time, effort of your staff and you and energy and, the cost of food and all the things. I know the gross amount is important, but when we distill it down, are we walking away with $10,000 for 200 hours of work, right? Maybe that's worth it. Maybe it's not. So we need to be thinking about that as well. And then certainly, I mentioned earlier, our staff time. We sometimes disregard this, right? Like we just say that, well, that's part of the work and this is what we do. But really breaking down the numbers, I think, is important for us. Doesn't mean we're going to cross it off the list right away because it's not meeting the numbers. There could be other reasons why we're doing this, but it brings your eyes wide open, and it also informs your board a little bit more about the events and what we're doing. We're going to get into that a little bit. I have to move my screen around here just to see. Okay. So before we put on the event, we do want to establish, as I mentioned, the purpose. There can be many purposes, but there has to be one driving purpose. Is this truly about fundraising? Yes, there are subsets of this and cultivation and stewardship. Absolutely. Every event is going to have secondary purposes, but the primary, we've got to pick one, right? I think that's really important to identify and say out loud and talk about internally so that everyone understands the driving force of the event. So is it to raise money? Is it to cultivate donors? Perhaps that is more of a, let's say, for instance, an open house. Let's say you do an open house in the fall. I think it's a lovely thing to do if you're the right nonprofit and you have something to show and welcome people in. That can be a tool and can be an event. Just giving an example. That can be low cost, and that can be something that cultivates current donors, perhaps bringing in prospective donors as well, or potential donors rather. Is it cultivating donors? Is it truly about building awareness? Is it more so about momentum building and building that awareness in the community more so? That can be a whole purpose of an event as a driving factor. Or is it stewardship and thanking people who have given consistently and this year and in recent years? That can be really important to do, and stewardship events can be really lovely to put on. But I think there should be one driving factor. I don't believe that we should do all of these at once because I don't think we will achieve our goals. It will be confusing. It will be a lot of things happening at one event for people to understand the purpose and the driving motivation there. We'll have time for questions at the end, so I'm sure there will be. That again, that primary events, appreciating. So if we choose that primary event, are we evaluating against that primary objective? So I don't want us to put together a stewardship event and say, okay, well, how much money did we raise? Well, it wasn't about that to begin with. So let's make sure we keep that same focus when it comes time to evaluate that event. And hopefully we are doing that to reflect on, okay, if it was a stewardship event, did those folks that we invited, did they show up? Did they feel appreciated? And these are different factors, right? We can put as much data into this as we can. Did we hit our goal of stewarding 20 donors at this event? Did we match them to the impact? Did we demonstrate the impact in the right way? Did we tell the story? Did we bring in how do we demonstrate the impact? Is it animals, right? Like, did we have something there for them to look and see and touch if it's possible? Those types of things I think are really good evaluation tools for stewardship. There are plenty of others, but just kind of briefly touching on this. And then certainly a fundraising gala, it's not just about how many people are there. Yes, that's an important factor, likely on how much you raise, but there are other factors in terms of how you're raising that money. And, is it multitude of things in terms of revenue generating? Is it ticket sales? Is it a silent auction? Is it a paddle raise? there could be many ways, right? But it's not necessarily about attendance all of the time. You could have 50 people and raise the most money that you ever have in a gala, or you could have 300 people and walk away with very little. So really trying to evaluate those with the right purpose in mind and not switching that afterwards, because that's not the right thing to do in evaluation time. All right. Well, if we're talking about a fundraising event, um, you know, thinking about what it really costs and what it really raised is important. So let's go through that exercise, because I know a lot of you on this call do have fundraising events, and some of them are very effective. So I'm sure many of you are doing this exercise. Just a reminder for those of you that are, and a good exercise for those of you that are not. You should always do this afterwards. So how much money came through the door at the top line, your total revenue? What were those real costs? That venue, the food, the music, certainly you may have some gifts in kind at moments like these. Are we receiving those properly and appropriately? But we also want to factor in, and I highlighted staff hours. I think that's really important to factor in here. I don't know how exactly you want to do that and track that, but I would encourage and challenge you to seriously consider the time and effort going into the event as part of your real costs, if that's possible. And then certainly your net revenue. Like, you may have raised $50,000, but you actually brought through the door at the end of the day a new 20,000, which is great, depending on the size of your organization, the true purpose of that event. But please, please, please run through this evaluation, especially if the primary objective is fundraising. Because you don't want to report out to your board that gala raised $50,000 and they are then spending $50,000 in their heads and through their encouragement of your activity, and truly it was really 20, right? Oh no, we spent that 3 times over. Okay, no, we actually brought in 20. Here's how we're allocating it. So make sure we remind our boards and report out on this, not only to our staff, but also to our board in the right way, so they start to understand this a little better. Okay, so some of our events, depending on the purpose, certainly. We mentioned this earlier. Many people, little people, a full room isn't necessarily the right room. So let's go through some of these questions and evaluate that. So how many attendees were new? How many were already connected in terms of volume of people in the room? So if the primary objective in this case is to bring new potential donors, volunteers towards the mission to help understand, it would be really helpful to know how many of those are already connected and how many were brand new. So how could we track that as attendees sign up, or as they register, or as they come to the registration table at that event? That's a tracking factor for that type of event. If we're in fundraising, how many were current or prospective major donors were present? How many were new? Something of that nature. If it is a fundraising or cultivation event as a primary focus, how many of our current donors or prospective major donors were present? That's really important. And then, did guests meaningfully experience the mission? I think that's important regardless of the type of event. These are just some questions to evaluate a multitude of types of events that you're putting on. So did guests meaningfully experience the mission and the impact, I would say? This is really important for, I think, every event we do, no matter that primary purpose, because we should always be focused on the mission and connecting everyone to the impact that they're making. And then did we collect contact information appropriately and accurately? That's really important to follow up and also to continue building that relationship with everyone there. And then did you know each new guest, or did you know who invited them or who reached out to them? Perhaps a board member, perhaps a volunteer, someone on staff. So these are just some varied list of questions to help us evaluate some of those more tricky, other than fundraising types of events, the primary focus. And then certainly, whoops, I didn't mean to go that far that quickly. As I mentioned, bodies in the room is wonderful, but if they're not all engaged, that can be not so great, right? We spend all the money, we spend all the time, we spend all the effort, and if they're not engaged in the right way, and we're not demonstrating that impact, we're not providing the insights, we're not connecting donors to the impact they're making in the mission, that can be a real missed opportunity. And also, you can build your pipeline from these types of events, whether you're raising money or stewarding, all types of things. And this can be part of that process as you guide donors through your donor pipeline. All right. So making the event part of the donor journey, I think this is really important, whether we have identified a potential prospect when it comes to fundraising, whether we have qualified them or cultivating them, getting ready to solicit them, stewarding them, or getting ready to start all over again. I think that understanding which part of the donor journey for each of these folks is really important part of event planning and the process and how we approach individuals at these events, and thinking about the activity and the itinerary of our events. So certainly looking through before identifying those priority guests and prepping for that mission moment and connecting donors or potential donors in particular to the impact they can make in our organization. So if you're having an event and you're not going through your list ahead of time, you should consider doing that. So who are our VIPs, if you will, on the 100 people list that are coming to our event this evening? Are we greeting them and having a unique touch, if you will, for some of them? Are we making it special for them? There are some new prospective donors that board members are bringing. We need to keep an eye out for these 3 people. And what I've done for some of this, if you have the luxury of having some staff, involved, if you're a shop that has a couple people, 2 to 5 or something like that. If it's just one, lean on your volunteers, lean on your board members, but you can really help identify some of these individuals ahead of time and assign board members, staff members to greet and welcome and make people feel special, to make sure that we are providing the right touch and the right approach for some of our priority guests in particular. And then during welcoming some of those key individuals, if this is someone that, let's say an example is someone representing a foundation that has given to the organization in the past, and they haven't necessarily attended the events, and you finally got them there, acknowledge them, thank them in front of the group, and really make it a moment where you can all come together and rally around that and celebrate it. It really goes a long way for someone that probably is very busy, and making the extra effort to be there is really lovely. So there could be some moments like that. There could be a retiring board member. There could be all sorts of moments, a new gift that the donor is fine with acknowledgement and you've asked ahead of time. Those sorts of things really give a moment and a pause during the event to recognize some special individuals. And then, of course, our follow-up, yes, we're going to evaluate the event, that's later, but making sure we send out the thank yous, we follow up, we add those prospects to the pipeline, we have a debrief of some type Again, if you're a small shop, that's fine. Bring in your board, make that part of the next meeting afterwards. And was there anyone there that I didn't see? Or did you, do we need to add someone to our pipeline? How do we follow up with these 5 people in a very special way rather than just a blanket email thank you? So maybe there's some handwritten follow up with some swag or a special invitation for a tour or the next event in the coming months. So just thinking about how to integrate your event into that donor journey as well. All right. And building on that, yeah, this is not necessarily an ask is next. For cultivating in the right way, it could be continuing that relationship with a tour, with offering a volunteer opportunity to see it, because they mentioned, wow, I'd really like to be involved at a different level. I have more time on my hands. I'm retired now. That's a signal, right? As, oh, they could be a volunteer. Let's offer it. Perhaps a follow-up if they have some expertise that the mission could really benefit from, perhaps a small group conversation with a board member, or just a one-on-one coffee meeting with you or someone in your organization, a program director whose work connects with them, or just simply a story about the mission and an introduction at a deeper level. All right, and making sure, again, I'm harping on this again because I think it's easy for us to get lost in measuring the right things for the right purpose. So again, the financial aspect, I know that's part of all of our events that we evaluate in some way, but I think it should be more prominent, of course, more so in our fundraising events. I don't feel like every event needs to raise money. I do not believe that. And I think you have to be very thoughtful and wise with the small budgets we have to put on events. But I think, and I know, that you can build really thoughtful events and meaningful events with small budgets that aren't about fundraising all the time. And they don't have to have 50 or 100 people all the time. They can be really meaningful beyond that. Our audience, make sure we're always looking at first-time attendees, new and prospective donors that we're identifying, and that we're following up and putting them in our CRM, putting them in our pipeline, making sure we get on that right away and have some action items associated with that. And we can utilize our board or volunteers to help us with that if it's just one of us, hopefully. And then relationships, building on all of those with some kind of follow-up in a meaningful way. Is that a tour? We just went through all of those. Those are just some ideas in terms of what's next to build on that. It doesn't have to be the next week, but making sure we're building into our plans. Hey, that was a prospective donor that has an interest. I know has capacity because the board member shared some things. I need to build out the next 6 months with this individual. So I need to follow up and say, let's grab lunch, perhaps next month when you have some time, and offer a couple dates a month from now to get it on their calendar. Those types of things. And then our pipeline, making sure our follow-up and our measurements about what happens, in the following 6 to 12 months as a result of that. If there's a way to get into the data for those that showed up to that really important event that we spent a lot of time, money, and energy on, that actually ended up giving at the end of the year would be really helpful. But also making sure we get them into our pipeline. So I would encourage all of us to do a sort of audit of our events, through all of the events that we do. Really looking at keep it, change it, eliminate it. I know that sounds really harsh. I'm not trying to be, but I think this is a really important exercise continuously. What is the primary purpose of the events? Are we actually achieving that? How are we doing it? Let's put some measurements in place. Start with 1 or 2. You don't have to throw the kitchen sink at it. Was the return worth that investment of our time, energy, money? This is not, this isn't, it's part data driven, but part knowing your organization, where you are and what your goals are, right? If you are a young organization and you're trying to build momentum and support, you're going to probably have to do some things that aren't going to raise a lot of money in the beginning, but you're building momentum, you're building cultivation, you're building awareness, and you're bringing people to the table. And that's really, really important to do. So this one can be tricky and it's arbitrary sometimes. So we have to be really careful about the return. What is the return for the stage that your nonprofit is at, and expectations? And then certainly evidence of whether it's strengthened our donor pipeline and our relationships. I think that has to, again, be evaluated on a case-by-case scenario, but I would suggest that you establish goals on the front end with some of these things, and then evaluate on the back end. Did we walk out with 5 new relationships? Did we put 3 people in the pipeline? Did we cultivate or recruit, 2 new volunteers? Whatever those numbers may be. And those can really help sometimes with number 2. Like, yes, we did all these things. It didn't give us money today, but it's going to provide opportunity and potential revenue in 6 to 12 months. So absolutely, this was worth it. But now we got to put in the work. So some of those things to evaluate all of your events and think through them. And then making your decision with this, I think, is really, really important. It can be, let's say it's a fundraising event. Let's use that because I feel like a lot of us have those. Everybody loves this event. All the same people show up to it. This is all fictitious, right? We have this event. Everybody loves it. Everybody, meaning the board and the volunteers and maybe some donors, right? Everybody loves it. It's, at the end of the day, we walk away with $5,000 after costs. And it takes us about 100 hours of staff hours to promote, to produce, to do everything, right? And the same people keep showing up. Okay. Is this worth our time or energy? Does this have something beyond fundraising? Because this doesn't sound like necessarily, if we're talking about it as a fundraising event, then maybe we need to change it or eliminate it. If what your goal is really to perhaps say the goal is 20,000, or that, if you're coming away with $5,000, you're putting 100 hours of work into it, I would encourage you to think about it differently. Maybe it continues with the fundraising behind the scenes, but really it's about bringing in prospective donors and cultivation. And then your charge moving forward, if you're thinking about changing it because it only brings in $5,000, your charge more so in the front end is to invite new people. Everybody to change it up a little bit. I want board members to bring new people to understand our mission and to be cultivated and to see what we do, and volunteers to reach out. Perhaps you change it in that way and it still brings in $5,000, but it's building your pipeline for the future. It's building your volunteer base it's doing something else as a primary function, because I would argue that it is not primarily fundraising. If it brings in only $5,000, it should probably have a different primary focus with a secondary, oh yeah, and we bring in $5,000, which is nice. That's a way you work through this, right? If it's an event where we are just stewarding our donors, lovely. So how do we evaluate that? How many of our donors actually show up? How are we connecting them into the impact in a meaningful way? What is the cost of this? Certainly that's part of it. And what is the format, and how do we flesh this out a little bit, right? So thinking through all of our primary focus of events, If we're doing an event and let's say it's a fundraising event, you're breaking even on it. That may be something that you reconsider or eliminate. Um, but maybe there's a greater purpose. That's why we have to really think about what are we doing at these events? Who's showing up? Why is it important? Are we doing this just to have a party and celebrate something? Like, are we celebrating something meaningful? Are we moving the organization forward? If so, how? And this can really help your boards in particular that can be really tied emotionally to events for lots of different ways. Think through, are we just throwing a party or are we moving our mission forward? And in what way? Fundraising, cultivation, stewardship. And then you have to make a decision. And if you have 20 events and they're doing a lot of nothing and we don't know the primary focus, you got to eliminate something, right? So thinking through volume, your staffing levels, the primary focus, this can help you whittle down to do a couple things really well and excellent. So I would encourage you to go through this evaluation, go through this audit, ask the hard questions, involve your board so they can understand a different perspective for events. Like, we don't do parties here just for the sake of doing parties. We run events with a primary focus to move the mission forward. That is the most important piece of this in terms of your audit. How is this event moving our mission forward? And then you identify your primary focus. And you're going to have to talk through that and really understand it deeply, or just say, we're doing lots of different things. The answer is we don't have a primary focus. We need to find one, lean in on it, and make it happen. Or this event can be eliminated. It really low attendance, no real return. We're not bringing new people. This is an easy answer for us, right? So I would encourage you to not only think about it, evaluate it, talk it, but then talk through it, then make the decision and change it or eliminate it or keep it and lean into it and really make it wonderful. Those driving events, you know what they are. You have at least one or two of them. Those are the ones you really build up and say, okay, here's our primary purpose. Here's our focus. We're going to make the most of this. We have a great platform here. This is a wonderful opportunity to continue doing. And sometimes when we have to make those hard decisions, eliminating an event this is not a failure. In fact, it's a victory. You're getting clarity. You're understanding what's working and what isn't. And it helps your board members understand your events a little better. There has to be strategy around every single one because we have so little time, energy, effort, and budget. We can't just do all these things if they're not connected to a strategy and purpose of our mission. So I say celebrate the things that you're eliminating, right? Like, this is a big win to put your focus and energy on the things that are actually moving the needle. So I think that we need to reframe our viewpoint around these, and also help our board members, our volunteers, and those closest to our organization reframe their thinking around our events and how we decide to move forward with them. All right. So wrapping up here soon. We're coming up on just about 40 minutes. I want to leave some time for some questions. I want to challenge you all in going back and really looking through all of your events and thinking about, what is that primary purpose? What does this actually cost us? I would challenge you also to consider your staff time, whether it be dollars or purely hours, however you want to evaluate that, perhaps both. Whatever you think is the easiest first step. And then our net revenue, what are we actually walking away with if it is a primary fundraising event? We do events that cost money that we don't recoup back, and we do that for really good reason. And then, who does it help us reach? So are we thanking our volunteers? Are we thanking our donors? Are we bringing new potential donors to the table? Are we reaching new clients that need our help in terms of our mission? There can be lots of different audiences that we are reaching. And then what happens after our events? How are we following up? What is our process? How do we get all the names and data? And then how are we evaluating this as staff? And then also briefing our board afterwards as well. I want to let you all know right before we take questions, I have a 6-week program coming up. I run a couple times called Lead the Ask, the Executive Fundraising Accelerator. I would love to have you join me. We have 3 locations coming up next week. So if you're interested in doing this, we'd have to get on board real quick. In Blacksburg, in Floyd, and Roanoke, Salem. This is a 6-week intensive in terms of thinking through every best practice from a rudimentary thought in terms of thinking our changing our thinking when it comes to fundraising, all the way through building our case for support, building a pipeline for support, building a plan for our fundraising, and certainly stewarding our donors in really thoughtful ways. We walk you through every step of this, give you action items to begin work on this right away. And I also do 2 one-on-one 1-hour strategy sessions. So this is really a really great deal. We have a lot of fun, and it's in person, which I think is really lovely. So I'd love to have you join us. There's the QR code. It's also on my social media and some other places where Lindsay has been kind enough to share as well. And then this is how you can get in touch with me. Lots of different ways. I'm on all of the social media, website, phone, email. And then I just started in May a podcast called Lead the Ask, because I think leadership is a really important part of asking and asking for lots of different things, and certainly fundraising and leading our organizations. So that is on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Listen, like, subscribe. Really appreciate it. I started out with longer versions. I've scaled those back to under 10 minutes for those of us that have really busy lives and are running nonprofits. So open to any questions now. Yes. Hello.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes. Hi.
Okay, great. I have a question. Do you have any recommendations? We're a bit of a younger nonprofit, and we're still kind of learning what types of events might be a good fit for us. And so I feel like we're trying to evaluate the ones that we're already doing, but it also feels risky, like pulling out a big event where we don't have any data yet about how that will go for us, and just any recommendations for kind of that chapter of event planning.
Yeah. Add slowly. Do not jump into doing a big event just because a board member says that's what we need to do, or has a feeling, or you have a sense. You have the right instinct already. I can tell just by how you framed your question. Evaluate what you're doing, go through that process with what you have already, see what is rising to the top, and build on what you already have. That would be my first recommendation. Make sure you go through every single event. You know what the purpose is, how much money it costs, how much money you're walking away with if it's a fundraising event, and how much time it takes to pull off. And then what is most meaningful? Evaluate that in terms of the different types of purposes. And you want to have a variety of events, right? You don't want to have only fundraising events. Then nobody's going to come to your stuff, because all you do is ask them for money. You never thank them. You never are demonstrating impact. So I think having a really healthy variety as well, like, what do we already have? What can we build on? What can we lean into and like pivot a little bit to create more of, rather than starting from scratch and starting something brand new in addition to everything we're doing. So I would say move slowly in terms of creating anything new. Evaluate. You probably already have 1 or 2 things that are really great that you can build on and think about differently and build out more if that's what you want to do. If not, then you can consider something. But you don't want to just throw an extra event into the mix in a hurry, because that's a big decision, and I would encourage you to build on what you already have. Catherine, hello.
Yeah, okay. Hi. Sorry, it's been a weird morning and my computer wasn't working with me there for a second.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of you, I know quite a few of you anyway. I'm Kat. I run Mountain Valor. We have a big event in 3 weeks called Mountain Valor Fest, and we are probably the only organization in the history of nonprofits that have decided to throw a giant $20,000 event for free. So it is, starts out as a remembrance ceremony first, and then my dog just jumped on my bed behind me. So it's a remembrance ceremony for 9/11, and then we bring in a whole bunch of resources for veterans and their families. And then on top of that, we try to add a bunch of kids events to make it fun so folks hang out long enough to actually approach those resources and hopefully take advantage of them. So we are looking this year, we are about 1/3 sponsor funded, and the rest has been private donations slash grants from organizations very similar to this one. And next year we are switching to make that fully sponsor based. We're moving to a bigger venue where parking is on site. You don't have to take the hay wagon, although everyone likes the hay wagon. But we can add camping, we can add all of these other things. And my first question is, how do I keep my board understanding that each small thing that we add is really a whole new thing to learn for me and for the organization? And then because that event and our programming in general costs so much money, in October, we're doing our first ever true fundraiser, which is a storytelling competition. So it's called Monsters and Moonshine, and we're selling tickets for $45. And we're at the venue is giving us a very good deal. It's a children's theater, so it'll be super cool. We're gonna have a spooky front porch, so you can tell your ghost stories there. You're competing for cash prizes. That one is easy in a lot of ways because it is controlled and contained. We can only do so much stuff in the space, so it can't really get that crazy. But it doesn't necessarily align with our mission. So, our mission is to support veterans and our families, and so people look at me a little strange. But the big thing is that we need something that raises money without it necessarily pulling on the same heartstrings that it would be if we were saying, hey, support the veterans, support the veterans, support the veterans. Because at some point that just kind of fades because a whole lot of organizations say that. So Monsters and Moonshine is kind of our way of making it a little fun, and also tying back into the Appalachian storytelling culture. But I'm just wondering if there is a better way to manage how those two things are combined, in that there are two big events. And because Halloween has to happen in October, which has to be the month after 9/11, right after each other, how do we separate approaching sponsors and saying, I want you to sponsor this, or I'd like you to sponsor this? Or do we just say these are our two events from here on out? Does that make sense? I rambled a bit.
Yeah, so the first question, I think, is with your board, bringing them along and making sure you're not doing a bunch of different ideas, one-offs, add this to the plate. Let's do this, let's do that. I think having a written plan, your fundraising plan along with your events, and having that all laid out for the year is a really important piece. And then not only saying, here it is, but diving into it with them and say, look, I have evaluated all of our events, just kind of what we talked about the framework here. Here's the primary purpose of this event. Here's why we're doing that. Here's the return on that. Here's why we're doing that for this stage in our growth. Like, we're a young organization, right? Like, we're building awareness, we're building support. This has got to be free for people. We're bringing people in. We're helping them understand our mission, connecting them to it, and trying to help more people, right? So going through that with them and helping them understand that there are certain driving factors for each event is and why we're doing it, and that we can't do 10 things and be scattered and not do 2 to 3 things or 2 to 4 things really well. And that is best practice of fundraising and this work. And you already know that. And you tell them that with confidence and also capacity as their executive director, certainly. And this is what we're going to double down on and do this work, because it takes about 6 months to build up to this. In terms of sponsors and various events, I mean, ideally, going to them with the variety of events, explaining to the sponsors the primary purpose, the audience, why you're encouraging them to consider this, because it lines up with their philanthropic goals as an organization. So rather than just saying, oh, here, would you like to be a sponsor, which I know you don't do, Catherine, because we've talked about this, but you're already making an ask, if you will. You're explaining the purpose of the event, and you're telling them about all of them at one time. Now, whether they decide to make one decision for the entire year for your organization, which a lot of corporate partners are doing, they don't want you going back to them 5 and 6 times. Oh, how about sponsoring this next month, and then this, and it's also wears you out, right? And they can think about their pot of money, which is, let's say, $50,000, and how do they spread the love out amongst these 3 organizations that align with their corporate values. You make one ask and you allow them to be strategic in what aligns with them and you. And so you can say, I'd love for you to be the primary sponsor for this event. I think this aligns as to X, Y, and Z. We've talked about it, and we'd love for your support for this new fundraiser. This is a new, we're growing it. We need some help here. And also, this would be a great opportunity for you because of this. So I think there's a way to make one ask, one big one, to go through all the events at one time. Now, whether they choose to support them in one fell swoop or multiple checks, whatever, it gives them a heads up for the year, and also doesn't wear you out going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Just some suggestions.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Holly, there's some questions in the chat I wanted to make sure we got to you. So one from Jody she's asking, is creating a partnership with other similar mission nonprofits beneficial? Does this help to promote stewardship and fundraising?
I think it can be. It depends on a lot of factors, right? I think that partnering with similar nonprofits and organizations, yes, can be very beneficial. Depends on the purpose of the event. Would that necessarily be beneficial for fundraising? I'd have to understand more about the particular event. There may be reasons as to why. I think that you have to be highly strategic with this work. Why are we partnering together? Is it because we both are working on the same program, and our organizations bring to the table different parts of our missions to this program, right? And so together we are putting on this program, therefore we are seeking funding together. That can be an excellent reason to do many events together with organizations like that we partner with. So yes, and it depends. Like, we want to be thoughtful, careful, strategic. So I think there is some opportunity there, especially in seeking funding. I'm sure in grants as well, because lots of our grants that we write can be, they want to see some collaboration with other nonprofits in different regions, different spaces. So I think it can work, and I think it's good for consideration, as long as we understand the primary focus, we are in alignment with that other organization, and who's doing what, and how we all benefit. That can be really lovely. It depends.
And then one more in the chat, Holly, from Joe. She's asking, as a small nonprofit with little staff, how do you conversate about valuing staff time? Do you think about it in a monetary value due to hourly rates? How do you measure that when it comes to adding staff value to the net profit of your event?
Yeah. I think starting with the hours that they spend on the event and the outcomes is the first step. If you want to add, the portion of that salary and or hourly rate. It also depends on your board and who you're communicating this information to. If it's just for your purposes, you can look at both and uh, weigh that against other events and activities that are the priorities for your organization. But I think if you're talking about it with your board, it really depends on your board. What do they want to see? Are they numbers driven? Are they, is it mostly warm, fuzzy feelings, right? So bringing data into the picture may be the first step. So for them, it may be the hours that you're spending on the event in comparison to perhaps something that is much higher priority, kind of putting those two together and helping them see, look, this is our big program of the year that where all of our time and energy goes to, and a staff member spends 50 hours on this. Here's this event that isn't really producing, and we're also spending 50 hours on that. We could bring that back into the fold, do all these other things that we want to do that are much more strategic. So really depends on the, what the objective is and how you're trying to outline that case. But I think a first step is the hours and also evaluating that against some other things that are your top priorities for your organization.
Holly, one question that came up in when folks registered in a few different varieties was if you're super small micro nonprofit that traditionally has not held events and is mostly spending all their money on the mission, how do you think about building in an events budget in that scenario and making the case to your board?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. At some point, I think it's important for your board to understand that if we are not doing strategic events, we are going to stagnate at some point. We will stop growing in some respect, whether that be the delivery of our mission and impact, right? It could be in revenue, it could be in staff, it could be in the things that we can't keep adding to the plate necessarily, whether that be programs or fundraising activities or events. So at some point, we are going to stagnate if we aren't bringing more people in, if we're not elevating our profile, if we're not reaching out and welcoming folks or thanking them or cultivating them. You can't keep doing the same things over and over again and expect growth to happen without some strategy, prioritization. And it depends on your goals, right? It depends on your top priorities. Is the plan to, 3 to 5 years, we want to stay the same size? And there are really good reasons for that. And here they are. Well, the goal is to grow, to double the organization in 3 to 5 years. If that's the goal, yeah, we have to do events for lots of different reasons. If we have to double the size of this organization, we're not going to do that only with our donor pool. Unless you have some great track record and you're scaling up with fundraising, that's a different story. But still, even so, how do you expect fundraising to continue to grow without stewarding those donors? So strategic events, I think that is really key to drive in terms of making the case for support and starting with 1 to 2, not overwhelming your board with, yes, we have to do all these things and here's why, but it has to be connected to the overall strategic goals of the organization. If our strategy is to grow this thing in 5 years and by 25%, we've got to start some activity in terms of donor cultivation, volunteer cultivation, thanking donors, bringing prospective donors to the table. Maybe it's just about growing the program. Then you have to do some events specific to the program, right? And the mission. So events are a really key tool in growing our fundraising, our capacity, our impact. And if that's the charge of your organization, it has got to begin to, if that's the charge, we have to have budget to execute on that. And if our board isn't willing to, consider a small budget to begin those steps, baby steps, then it's going to be hard to deliver on that strategy, those strategic goals. So connecting it to what the board desires and the strategy of where the organization is headed is absolutely key to developing strategic events. We're not just doing events for the sake of doing them. They are connected to strategic goals of this organization and moving it forward. And that's the case, truly.
Thanks, Holly. Definitely agree. I know that we're at time, and this is certainly a topic we could keep talking about, but I just want to say a huge thank you for everyone who joined today, and a very big thank you to Holly for jumping in and presenting on this topic. I always learn something when I hear from you, so it's just always a pleasure to hear from you. And folks, I'll be sending this recording out probably by early next week. And we just hope to see you next month or sooner. I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Take care.
Thank you. Good seeing you all. Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Holly.
Bye.
We appreciate you.
Thank you.